hoops. Etan, it's a great time of year. Everybody looks forward to March Madness, NCAA tournament. Have you filled out your brackets yet?
No, I usually don't fill out brackets, but I'll be watching. I can never really guess upsets, and I guess that's why they're upsets. But I never have any success with those, because they're matches that I would not have thought, what I mean, would have gone the way they go. So I don't even bother. But no, I'm looking forward to watching though.
Can you take us back to your playing days? What is this time like as a player, knowing that you've got, you're one of 64. I mean, obviously after tomorrow, there's 2 games tonight, but, tomorrow when this thing tips off for real, you're one of 64 that has a chance at a national championship. Can you speak to, I guess, the preparation and the pressure? And, we see upsets this time of year that don't normally happen. Like, a 14 wouldn't beat a 3 generally during the regular season, but you see it in the NCAA tournament when, the favorite gets tight and, the crowd gets behind the underdog. What is it like being a player in this event?
Oh, it's an amazing time. It really is. When guys get together and we talk about the good old days and we talk about the March Madness and the tournament and going through, and everybody has their own experiences, and you see teams from different eras. Like maybe a lot of people were counting them out. I know J-Dub, John Wallace, always talks about how, a lot of people didn't think that they were going to go on the run that they went on. They didn't necessarily limp into the tournament, but they weren't like highly rated, to really go as far as they went. And they went on this unbelievable run. They always talk about it, and Otis Hill, that's my guy. And he talks about this, the way that the entire city just really wrapped their arms around them and supported them, and how everything went the entire time. Well, coming back to Syracuse and seeing everybody out there in the snow, and guys do a lot of reminiscing. So it's really a special time.
You talk about the happy times of it, but does the loss ever leave? You were in one of the more disappointing losses, the Michigan State. Weren't you in that one, the Michigan State game up in Auburn Hills? Like, does that loss ever leave you?
Oh, no, not at all. You know what I mean? I remember after that loss, I didn't even want to talk to the media. I was like, no, I don't want to say anything. I am not happy right now. I'm just staying here by myself. And I remember the coach was like, hey, well, the media wants you. I was like, well, tell the media to pick somebody else. That's how much it hurt. And that was one of those things where you get together. And I still haven't watched the game, to be honest with you. I haven't watched the game in all these years. But we talk about it, me and Ryan Blackwell, Jay Hart, Quinn Delaney, we get together and we talk about that game in particular and how we was up and we had them, and then it all just kind of crumbled. But yeah, that's what you do, But that shows you how special March Madness and the tournament is for all players, because everybody does that. Everybody all talks about their college experience with March Madness.
You mentioned that you needed to cool down after that loss, and Mike Waters reported yesterday that Syracuse had not done its exit interviews yet with the players, and talk about whether they're staying or going. You think it's appropriate to wait like a week or so after that loss to let everybody decompress and get their thoughts together before you're doing those exit interviews?
100%, yes. You don't want to do an interview fresh off of emotions. No, that's the last thing you want to do. Take a minute, you know what I mean? Take a breather. Maybe even go home for a minute for the weekend or something like that, and then come back. And then, you've had time to process, talk to your loved ones, talk to your family, to your friends, really think about everything, and then come back. So I saw a couple of people mentioning that, and they are speculating on, okay, well, does that mean that this player is? I was like, no, it doesn't mean anything. It just means that players are, as a program, they're taking a minute to just kind of decompress. And after this tough year that we had this season, I think that's a good idea.
And that's got to be the next order of business, right, is to do the exit interviews and hopefully get some clarity by Monday when the transfer portal opens, who's coming back and who might be hitting the portal. And, like last year with Judah, they didn't know for a while, right? And they had to have a contingency plan in place both ways. Either he comes back, this is what we're going to do. He doesn't come back, this is what we're going to do. I guess along those lines of time, and we had this conversation earlier in the show, Paulie and I, when Jordan was in here, and we were talking about, who should come back or who should hit the portal. Do you have strong feelings about, of the current roster, which guys would you really want back if you're Adrian Autry, and which guys, again, not that you're trying to kick them out the door, but which guys would you be okay if they went somewhere else?
Well, I would take a little bit of a different approach to this, and me and Devo talked about this. Actually, I just posted it, on my social medias. We talked about the NIL and the collective and what it's going to take to be able to retain guys. So what we want becomes rather, insignificant if we don't have the NIL to be able to retain them. And I think Devo did a great job of really breaking it down. We quoted Coach Boeheim, who said that, I don't have a quote right in front of me, but he was saying that the good teams are spending $8 to $10 million, and if you are not going to spend money, you're not going to be one of the quality teams. I'm paraphrasing.
I think he said that on our show, as a matter of fact. So I remember him saying that. Yeah,
I posted it and quoted the show, but he said it. So and Devo has been saying this for weeks. And a lot of the people with the feedback was saying, no, that's ridiculous. Devo's wrong. We don't need that much money. We'll be fine with $4 or $5 million. And Devo's like, no, we won't. that is not the level that other teams are spending. So if we're going to compete with the other teams, we have to up our NIL. You know what I mean? I don't want to get into the particulars of how you do that or, what actually has to happen, but it has to happen. Because if it doesn't, then we just won't be able to compete with the other teams. We have to be able to retain even the players we have, so we have to have the NIL to do that. So, Devo went through JJ. He's going to command quite a bit. He went through even some of the incoming freshmen. So even before you even get to the transfer portal, you have to be able to, pay the guys that you have currently. And you have to have NIL to do that. So, yeah, I think that's what I don't know if a lot of Syracuse fans really understand that aspect of it, but you need to see what other teams are spending and what they're doing. Devo always talks about Kentucky, who's starting five. Just the starting five is like $6 million. Just the starting five by itself. So it's something that is definitely important. Before we even get to all of that, that's like the first order of business.
All right, so let me ask you this then. You've got X number of dollars, and we don't know what that budget is at this point, but you've got X number of dollars. Who are you spending the most on of the players that we know? The two, I know they've got more than two freshmen coming in, but Kyan and Sadiq in particular, JJ, Donnie. In your mind, who is worth the most?
Well, you got to understand with the market, it's not just putting out a number. It's almost where you're a restricted free agent.
Right.
So you're talking in NBA terms because that's basically what it is. So if another team offers, say, a Donnie Freeman, say $1 million, okay?
That's what it's worth then, right?
Right, and that's what it's worth. So that means that's what we have to go look at and say, okay, either we're going to match this or we're going to let him go. And that's what it boils down to. So it's a testing the market. So when you come to these exit interviews, it's not like the exit interviews of the past, where the coaches just say, "Oh, we really love you. We like how you worked hard. We want you to be part of the family and everything." It's literally, what number are you going to put? Because this is what this school and this school is telling my representatives that I can make at their school. And now, are you going to match it, or do you want? It's a whole different conversation. You have representatives with you. I think I was too smart to say they don't like to work with representatives, but players have their lawyers and agents and representatives with them, and it's a different conversation. So I say that to say, it doesn't really matter where you place it. It's a matter of what the market tells you that each player can get.
Yeah, no, you're making a lot of really good points, and I think we saw that with Mike Waters' article about NIL a few weeks back when he talked about Kadari Richmond, that Kadari apparently, there was a conversation between him and Syracuse, and that conversation quickly ended when Syracuse found out how much he was being offered from St. John's, and, they said, okay, we can't touch that, and Kadari said, okay, thanks, there's no point in me even visiting and wasting anybody's time. So I think we're certainly seeing that. Money aside, and I know it's hard to put the money aside, but from a strictly like a basketball decision, I want to ask you about two guys in particular, Chris Bell and Elijah Moore. From a basketball decision, what do you think these two young men should do?
We can start with Chris Bell. I've seen what he is capable of doing. I know that he had a difficult year this year, but I see the potential. So a lot of times, a lot of guys are getting a certain amount of NIL off of potential. I don't know if he's going to exceed that amount because other programs have seen his potential, so they're going to offer him something. I know a lot of fans might say, okay, well, he didn't have a good year, so maybe your stock is down. I don't know if that's necessarily how that's going to work. So I think that when you go to, come to the table, it's really important that what you present to guys is indicative of the other offers that they can receive, or it's a moot point. Like there's a very short conversation. And I think that there is something to retaining guys that have been through the system. I do. That they have an idea of what Red wants. They have an idea of what is expected of him. And the new era of an entire new team every single year, that's got to be difficult. So I think there's a balance of having some guys, returning that have been through the system, coupled with some new people, whether they're the transfer portal or the incoming freshmen. So, in my opinion, I think you need a balance of both.
Yeah, no, for sure. Elijah Moore, your thoughts on him again from a basketball perspective? Do you think he would benefit more from moving on to a different program? Again, knowing what's coming in, and there's going to be a lot of competition at his position, or do you think he comes back? From his perspective, not necessarily from the coach's perspective, but what do you think he's thinking at this point?
I think he's going to have the opportunity and some offers to be able to play a bigger role in other places.
Yeah,
I think he's shown what he can do with limited minutes. I mean, sometimes his minutes are so inconsistent and they're so limited, and he's still able to, produce, which is very difficult to do. And other programs, I'm sure are taking note of how he's handled himself as a professional, how he's come, whenever his numbers was called, he's been ready, and he's performed, to the best of his abilities. Now, of course, could he perform better at times? Yes, we can nitpick and break down different things that he could have done better. But overall, I think he's given himself the opportunity to play a bigger role in other places. Now, of course, I would love to see him continue on his journey in Orange, but I understand if he is offered a bigger role with a higher NIL amount someplace else.
All right. Last question for you as we kind of bring it back full circle back to the NCAA tournament, which starts in earnest tomorrow. You said you don't fill out the brackets, but just from put your analysis hat on or your analyst hat on here. Give me the recipe for the national champion. What does a national champion need to have? What kinds of teams should we be looking for when we're filling out our bracket in terms of yes, I think this team will win it because they've got and they check the boxes.
Well, a lot of the things you look at throughout the season, the resilience that teams have the ups and downs and how they've responded during the season and how the momentum of how they're playing. We have teams that have made an incredible run during their conference tournaments. They've made different adjustments, so now they're playing a lot better. It's interesting because we talked a lot, on me and Devo talked about North Carolina getting in. And they've made some adjustments, and it was a little bit, surprising that they got in. I'll say that, with the number of quad one wins and everything. But you look at the road that they have, and it was like, they could actually go on a run.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Yeah.
I mean, there's just different things that happened during the tournament that were really unexpected, and sometimes just the way that things are laid out, it's a little bit more favorable of a road for certain teams, and that has to be factored in. But it's going to be fun to watch. Yeah,
and we saw that with NC State last year, right? That they felt like they got a second chance at life. They won the ACC. They went in playing with house money, and they kept it rolling throughout. And you look at North Carolina, they get a Mississippi team that I think they can match up with. In fact, they're actually favored in that game. And then if form holds, they would get Iowa State, who's down two of their best players. So it's right there, Etan. You're absolutely right. They could go on a little run here. Listen, we appreciate the time as always. We appreciate the insight. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Sounds good. Have a good one, fellas.
All right. Etan Thomas joining us here on the show.
Just because if they do go on the run doesn't mean they deserve to
Correct. You're absolutely right.
I hate that.
Yeah.
See, they deserve no. Well,